the judge has said, as well as the timer, I'm going to get the timer. All right. How much knowledge do you think college students have about their student loans? The answer may surprise you. According to the Brown Center on Education Policy, half of all first-year students underestimate how much debt they have by more than $10,000. Less than 1/3 can pinpoint their debt within $5,000. And over a quarter, or 28% of students who have a federal loan don't even know they have a federal loan. Let me ask you a very important question. How can a student be expected to manage their debt effectively when they don't even know how much debt they have? It is because Isaac and I believe that students who are regularly informed about their financial obligations make more well-informed decisions we stand resolved. The United States should significantly reform its policies regarding higher education. So how could this happen? How could our nation, which values transparency, accountability, and simplicity in the borrowing process, fail to ensure that borrowers have the adequate information? The answer to that question rests in fact one. The federal government is exempt from truth in lending disclosure requirements. The federal government is exempt from these laws. In 1969, to bring clarity and accountability to the borrowing process, Congress passed the Truth in Lending legislation. This law dictates that the lender has the contractual responsibility to provide information like how much you've borrowed, what the interest rates are, and the monthly payment plan. These laws apply equally to every single consumer lender in the United States, except for one, the federal government. As Boston College reports October 30th, 2017, quote, truth in lending laws apply to all private education loans. They do not apply to federal Title IV loans, Stafford, Perkins, and Plus, unquote. In college, like most students, Kristen Bastian took out a student loan. She knew that a home mortgage received a mortgage statement, and that if you have a loan on a car, you get sent a bill. Why should student loans be any different? Unfortunately, upon graduation, she was shocked to hear that she now owed over $30,000 in debt. Like Christian, we believe this makes little sense. Doesn't it seem odd that the largest piece of legislation governing finances doesn't apply to the largest consumer lender? Private entities must provide this information. The federal government should be held to the same standard. Fact 2, loan information is not consolidated and therefore confusing. Loan information is not consolidated and therefore confusing. The issue of inadequate student loan information is not just limited to federal loans. Although private lenders are required to disclose these information, many students take out multiple different loans with different interest rates. To make matters worse, different loans come with different loan servicers, so students will have to manage payments across several accounts. There is currently no one singular source that combines student loan information, which is accessible for students. Take, for example, Joni Sweet. When Joni graduated from college, she thought she knew her total loan balance. However, when she graduated, she was shocked to hear she would double what she had originally thought. She says, quote, my private loans and federal loans, while provided by the exact same lender, were listed in 2 separate areas. I was shocked once I received information about how much I actually owed, unquote. Because Joni's loan information was not clear and consolidated, she misunderstood the terms of those loans. Fact 3, current loan information resources are ineffective. Current loan information resources are ineffective. In the current system, if a student wants to access information about their loan, they must use online tools such as the National Student Loan Data Service, or NSLDS for short. This system is confusing and hard to use. Acquiring just the total balance on a loan requires more than 15 steps, and once that information is acquired, it is oftentimes incomplete. Professor Martin Mitchell affirms these findings, saying, quote, although NSLDS gives information to some loan information, students won't find real-time balances, interest rates, a cumulative loan balance, or projected monthly payments, unquote. Although the Higher Education Act of 1965 requires colleges to provide financial information to students, colleges don't have access to these federal loans, and therefore point students back to the failed NSLDS system. Parents as well report having trouble navigating this site with their children. Matthew M. Chingos and Elizabeth J. Akers summed up the issue perfectly when they wrote, quote, the lack of literacy of personal finances of college going is almost certainly leading some students into decisions they later come to regret. The consequences of those decisions come as a surprise to them once it's too late, unquote. For these reasons, Isaac and I present the following plan. Our mandate is simple. Require the annual disclosure of student loan information. require the annual disclosure of student loan information. Congress shall pass and the President shall sign into law the LEADS Act of 2017. The LEADS Act requires all colleges and universities that accept federal funding to send students who have a loan an annual disclosure statement of all borrowing costs. The LEADS Act stipulates that the disclosure must include 4 elements. First, the total loan balance. Second, the interest rate on all of the student's loans. Third, a projected payment under a payment plan of 10 years. And fourth and finally, contact information available for financial counseling and resources. Our agents of change are Congress, the President, Department of Education, and any other needed enforcement. The affirmative team reserves the right to clarify this plan throughout the round. No further funding is needed as colleges themselves will be enacting the policy. There are 2 primary principles that justify the affirmative team's course of action. The first justification is fairness and transparency in the borrowing process. Isaac and I believe in the rule of law, and in the same way we believe in equal application of the law. U.S. Representative Randy Holt-Green summed up the issue perfectly when he asserted the Department of Education is the largest consumer lender in the United States and should provide the most transparent and helpful information to borrowers. Ensuring borrowers understand their debt obligations is an important first step to ensuring they are able to make their payments, unquote. This is precisely what our plan fixes. Under an affirmative ballot, the federal government will no longer be held above the law. This leads directly to justification 2, improved financial literacy. Improved financial literacy. When the specific loan disclosure mandated in the LEADS Act was tested at 3 universities, the results were quite impressive. At Indiana University, the following 4 years after the LEADS Act was tested, borrowing decreased by $100 million. To date, students who graduate from Indiana University, 50% graduate with no debt at all, and 80% graduate with debt below the national average. The loan disclosure not only reduced unnecessary borrowing, but also increased the effectiveness of other financial literacy initiatives. Once students at Indiana University were given an accurate assessment, they sought out other programs to help deal with their debt. At Montana State University, students who received loan disclosures were incentivized to work harder, and as a result, the following semester had higher grades, GPAs, and took more credits. Borrowing decreased at Montana State University by 1/3. Finally, at Missouri University, students who received loan disclosures were incentivized to seek out financial counsel. As Amy Glenn, Vice President and Director of Financial and Community Initiatives at Campus Logic said, providing this information to students annually keeps it top of mind to enable more thoughtful consumption, unquote. Our nation has always recognized the need to promote truth in lending, but failing to adequately inform students about their financial situation goes against this honor principle. Isaac and I recognize that the issue of student loan crisis cannot be solved by one individual policy. But we further contend giving this information to students is an important first step to ensuring they have the information available. Thank you, and I'm ready for cross-examination.
I hope you're doing well today. Before I get into the specifics of your case, I hope we agree to a couple of burdens the affirmative team must uphold in order to warrant change. Beginning with that there's at least some sort of need for reform, that we're not just changing a policy arbitrarily.
Absolutely.
Okay, can we also agree the affirmative team has to in some way address that harm? Even if you don't make it perfect, we have to start solving those problems.
Sure, the harm asserted is that students do not understand their financial obligations.
Right, okay, and can we also agree that the affirmative team has to show that even if you have advantages, you have to guarantee a net benefit over the current system?
Sure.
Okay, glad we can agree to those points. Before I get into those specifics, can you point to me where in the text of the law, with the Freedom of Information, the Loan Act, that it actually excludes the federal government from that?
The Loan Information Act is actually called the Truth in Lending Act. It does not exclude federal loans from being provided. However, in the current system, the federal loans are exempt because the Truth in Lending Act was implemented before the federal government started making it.
Okay, can you point to me the place in the law where it says that the federal government is exempt from this act?
The federal government simply is not required to follow the law, as we have the copy of the law, if you'd like.
If you could pass us a copy of the law, that would be great. Also, a full text of the bill and the 1AC, if you could give us that.
Absolutely. Here's the copy of the bill, the 1AC, and attachment of the loan disclosure.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Now, if a loan provider is created after the passing of this act that you had discussed, are they exempt from the law as well?
No.
Okay, great. Now, how many students are unable to pay their loans right now?
That's hard to quantify. In the current system, 1 in 10 default on their loans. That's not the issue. We're not trying to solve for students defaulting on their loans. We're simply trying to provide them more information to assess their financial
so
situation.
you're talking about transparency and clarification. That's good because it helps students make their payments more effectively.
Absolutely, and not necessarily, that's not the goal of providing. I mean, when you look at a credit card bill, the purpose is not to micromanage behavior of borrowing, it's simply to inform individuals how much
they
they
can make
have.
better decisions about their finances.
That's one of the goals, but it's also to fulfill the lender's responsibility
Okay,
of
so
providing
what
information.
benefit does transparency in and of itself have outside of making better financial decisions?
Fulfilling the obligation of the lender.
Okay. Let's move on to your point. You talked about how there were current loan programs that were ineffective. How many students were either unable to pay or unable to make good decisions because the current system is intransparent?
That's impossible to quantify. The problem with CERTA is not that students aren't able to pay their loans, it's that students do not have an accurate understanding of their loans.
Okay, so we just want to make sure they know just the heck of it.
Just to provide the information to students to fulfill the responsibility of the lender, but also to ensure that students can have the responsibility to pay back their debts.
I'm glad we can agree to that. Now, you talked about how there was going to be an increase in financial literacy with Indiana, Montana, and Missouri. Those are the 3 examples you brought up.
Sure.
Has it happened anywhere else? Have we tried this before anywhere else?
These are the 3 universities tested. However, many states have actually started passing the policy of the affirmative team in the year 2019 already enacted.
At those 3 universities, was that the only policy dealing with finances implemented?
Counseling was also tested, but counseling is required under the Higher Education Act of 1965.
Thank you for your time.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Whenever everyone's ready. Millard Fillmore once stated, "It is not strange to mistake change for progress." And unfortunately, that's really the idea of the affirmative plan, that essentially if we change up the way we do loans, that inherently we're going to improve borrowers' understanding of the financial system and therefore allow them to make better payments. But unfortunately, as much as we would like that to be the case, that is not actually what will happen under the affirmative plan. We're going to be examining that. And what I first want to do is present you with some significant arguments, which really show you why there's not such a large problem in the current system as the affirmative plan would have you believe. So let's start off with my first argument, that the TILA has no exemption. The TILA has no exemption. Now, in the very first fact, we talked about the TILA, or the Truth in Lending Act, which basically required that all loaners actually give monthly statements talking about the financial aspects of a borrower's finances. Now, this was extremely interesting because they stated that the TILA has an exemption for the federal government, essentially that it doesn't apply to the federal government. However, it was created before the federal government started giving out loans, as they themselves admitted. So there's no specific exemption to the federal government. The only reason that they're saying the federal government would be exempt is because the federal government started giving out loans after the creation of the act. However, that logic doesn't make sense when you think about it. If a private lender started giving out loans after the creation of the act would still be applied to them. So why when the federal government started giving loans out, does the act suddenly not apply to them? Now, to clarify this understanding, I actually asked for a copy of the TILA, and they do not have a copy that they could provide us with. All they have is a summary and advocacy saying that it doesn't seem like it applies to the federal government. I would argue that that is not enough for them to base their entire case on the financial literacy and how it needs to apply to the federal government off of that, and not have a copy that they can actually give us to prove their point. So this point right now is null and void in the round, since they themselves cannot pass this to us. But let's move on to my next point I really want to bring up, which goes into the idea of, is financial literacy going to be approved with this, and is there really a problem in the current system? So my second significance point is that the lack of financial literacy isn't inherently bad. The lack of financial literacy isn't inherently bad. Now, the reason I bring this up is because the affirmative team essentially thinks that if they can just somehow make it seem as if students know more about their loans in general, then the affirmative ballot is warranted. That is definitely not the case. As their own evidence states under Justification 1, it says that they want to help borrowers understand their debt obligations are important, and it is a first step to ensure that they are able to make their payments. Basically, what it's saying is that the reason they want to help borrowers understand what they are borrowing is for the end goal of being able to make their payments. So we have to understand, the goal of the affirmative team, if they just help financial literacy, who cares? We help financial literacy. But that doesn't really matter unless it actually helps the students make better financial decisions. And we're going to be seeing how that's not the case. Their own evidence agrees with my point on this. So it's my third significant point, that we have a high repayment rate. Now they talked about how lots of students don't have financial literacy, but who cares if they're actually making good financial decisions and are paying their loans. They brought up one example of a student who didn't seem to know her loan amount, but I would say that anomalies cannot actually prove a harm in the system. There are mistakes in every system. There are people who do not understand their finances in every system. The question is, do we have a predominance of failure? And that is not the case. In fact, the Department of Education in 2017 released statistics on their federal student loans, and it states that the cash recovery rate is above 100% in every single instance of student loans. What does that mean? The federal government is making a profit on every one of these student loans, meaning that these loans are actually being repaid, and the interest rates are being repaid. That's the only way the federal government can make a profit. So even if there are anomalies of students who don't understand their finances, who can't make loan payments, that happens in any system. But the problem is they haven't proven a predominance of failure. And that is necessary to warrant changing the entire nation's loan system. So now let's move into some solvency points. Because they talked about the idea of how they're really going to be solving for financial literacy, allowing students to make more effective financial decisions. And so under solvency, or really whether or not their plan solves, I want to bring up my first point, which is that the past precedence is against the affirmative team. Past precedence is against the affirmative team. Now they brought up three specific examples: Missouri, Montana, and Indiana. As my partner clarified in cross-examination, I'm going to read three pieces of evidence from each of these showing that this actually did not help improve literacy, it did not help improve students' payments. Let's look at the first example, the University of Missouri. And this was by Rajiv Duroli, who's an associate professor of public policy at the University of Kentucky. And he said on December 5th of 2017, I quote, "In the first study, Rajiv Duroli and Cassandra Harper implemented a field experiment in partnership with the financial aid office at the University of Missouri. They randomly assigned half of all undergraduate students who borrowed student loans to receive individually tailored letters with information about their borrower," which is what the affirmative team is doing. These authors compared the borrowing choices of the students who received the letters with students who were not given additional information. The letter did not affect students' likelihood of borrowing or the amount borrowed, end quote. Basically, students did not make better financial decisions just because they got a letter telling them what their debt was. That did not happen in Missouri. But let's look at the next example, students to say no. That is the reason financial literacy improved, not just because they got some debt. So in the end, we can see that in the current system, the payments are fine. Financial literacy is not inherently good unless it helps these students make better financial decisions, and it is not going to help them do so. And that is why I would urge a negative ballot. Thank you.
Everyone's all set? And timer's ready to go? Congratulations on debating at finals and nationals. Just have a few questions.
Of course.
First, should we provide the most information to students?
I believe that it's good to provide information, but information itself is not inherently beneficial unless you can show that information actually creates a positive impact.
Do you believe in equal application of the law?
If the law is supposed to apply to everyone, then yes, I believe it should be applied to those it's meant to.
It was your contention that TILA has no exemption for the federal government, the Truth in Lending Act, correct?
You yourself agreed to this because federal lending started after TILA was implemented.
We can agree that the federal government currently doesn't give out loan information.
I haven't seen any evidence on this.
Now, you said that we don't have a copy of the Truth in Lending Act, correct?
Yes, you yourself told me that.
Did we pass you back the case flow of it?
You passed me back a summary that is definitely not the law and that does not allow me to actually make an assessment of whether or not it has an exemption for the federal government.
Right. Did you read the part talking about the exemption from the federal government?
You passed me evidence saying that in their opinion, people's opinion, there was an exemption for the federal government.
Can we agree the Truth in Lending Act is thousands of pages long?
I don't actually have a copy, so I can't say.
All right. And can we agree that the NSLDS does not provide the interest rates or payment plans?
I can't agree to anything unless you're providing evidence on it.
Now, did you respond to the evidence in the 1AC that said it was impacting interest rates or payment plans?
I didn't specifically respond to that exact piece, except through the points that I brought up in my notes.
You stated that we only had one example of a student underestimating their debt that we needed to prove a systemic problem, correct?
Not just a systemic problem of underestimating debt, but rather a systemic problem of people making bad financial decisions and not paying back their student loans.
Did you respond to the Brookings study that found that half of all students can't estimate their debt within $10,000?
Yes, I did. I said that the lack of financial literacy is not inherently bad. The problem is that that actually impacts their payments, and I provided evidence that it's not.
So can we agree that the credit card company should send out a credit card bill?
I would agree that the credit card company does send out a credit card bill.
Do you believe in the principle of a credit card bill and informing borrowers?
I think it can be nice. You haven't made the actual proof, though, that this is inherently beneficial to your plan.
Sure, you said borrowing didn't decrease at Missouri, correct?
Yes, I brought up evidence on Montana, Missouri, and Indiana.
Now, do you provide the sample size for this?
I can provide you with the exact evidence. It went through all students borrowing student loans. I believe at least in one of the examples, I can provide you with all the evidence if you want to.
So you did not provide the sample size for Missouri University?
I believe I actually did, but I could pass it to you.
And you would agree with me at Missouri University it increased financial aid?
It said it assigned half of all undergraduate students who borrowed student loans. So
how much
half
is that
of them.
representative for?
I can't specify, but half is usually a good percentage and statistically significant when we usually look at statistics.
At Montana State University, can we agree that the Department of Education did a counter study?
I cannot say that. If you want to provide that counter study, I'd be happy to review it.
You said Indiana University had other initiatives. Can we agree that counseling is already required?
I actually stated that, but the problem was counseling wasn't their only other initiative.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the answers. All right, real set?
When I was a little younger, I learned a very important lesson. It was when my brother Micah tried to trade his pennies for my dimes. And he said because his pennies are bigger, therefore they must have more value. Now, I didn't know any better because I was a little younger, so I agreed. It was then that I learned that ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is bankruptcy. And for millions of students across the United States of America, ignorance of their financial situations leads to debt. John and I believe that informing students of exactly how much they owe and when they'll have to repay it allows for students to prepare for their future, to understand their financial situation, and to plan accordingly. We believe in literacy, but furthermore, we believe in equal application of the law. We believe that the federal government should not be held at a different level than any other consumer lender in the United States. These are the reasons we proposed our policy for you in today's debate round. And before I address the points of argumentation presented by the negative, I'd like to refocus this debate round on those principles. The first one is fairness and transparency in the borrowing process. Under this issue, we believe in the rule of law. And in the same way, we believe in equal application of the law. We believe that lenders, whether a private entity or the federal government, all should play by the same rules when it comes to lending disclosure requirements. The second principle is improved student financial literacy. We believe that the lending disclosure requirements that apply to adults when taking out a loan to pay for a home or a car should apply to students when they make similarly significant financial transactions and taking out a loan to pay for their education. We believe that because the process of taking out a loan has transformed over the years from a major paperwork-intensive process to simple click and submit processing, the need to ensure that this information is at the top of the student's mind has never been greater. Finally, while John and I understand that the issue of student debt in the United States cannot be fully solved by one individual policy, we further understand that the first step in solving any problem is realizing that there is one. And the first step for students in solving the problem of their debt is realizing that they have a problem with their debt. The Affirmative Team's course of action provides them the information that they can use to make well-informed financial decisions. The first point of argumentation presented by the negative in today's debate round was that the Truth in Lending Act has no exception. It has no, or rather, exemption of the federal government. They stated, in effect, they didn't actually explicitly state this, but in effect, they basically were contending that it does apply to the federal government. They did not provide any evidence for this, and that's my first response. My second response is that we provided a summary of the bill, and of course we didn't provide the actual copy of the bill because my parents wouldn't let me spend that much amount on printing, but we provided a summary that details exactly what the bill does, along with a part of evidence detailing that the federal government is exempt. But I'd like to read a few more parts of evidence just to make it clear in everyone's mind. According to Boston College, as my partner read in his last speech, the amendments to Regulation Z, which is truth in lending, apply to all private education loans. They do not apply to federal Title IV loans, Stafford, Perkins, and Plus. According to Wade Caruso, who is the president of Montana State University, the federal government requires that students be informed regularly about the outstanding balance on their loans when they leave school, but never while they're enrolled. The fact of the matter is currently the Truth in Lending Act of 1969 does not apply to every consumer lender in the United States. In fact, it does not apply to the biggest consumer lender in the United States, the federal government. If you believe in equal application of the law, you must decide on the plan of the affirmative team, because we extend that law to every consumer lender in the United States. The second issue is they stated that illiteracy isn't bad. They probably don't have brothers like my brother Micah, because illiteracy really is bad, because when you are illiterate, you make poor decisions. The impact of illiteracy is poor financial decisions. They stated that literacy isn't good unless it changes the decisions. And we would agree that first, it does, and secondly, a lot of the time when we provide this information to students, they already are in a good financial situation, so they won't necessarily need to change. So examining the change in borrowing as an indicator for success is faulty, because not every student needs to change their borrowing, but that still doesn't mean that they are more illiterate than the policy of the affirmative team. But in the current system, we can see that students are illiterate. Through the Brookings study, as read at the beginning of the first affirmative constructive, detailing that over 50% of students in the United States cannot accurately estimate how much debt they have within $10,000, and over 1/3 cannot accurately estimate how much they have within $5,000. The third argument was that there's a higher payment rate. They stated that because a higher payment rate exists in the current system, therefore there really isn't a problem with student debt. And that's not the only thing we need to look at. Because although there may be a higher payment rate, people are paying back their loans, in the current system, 1 in 10 people who have a federal loan, according to the Department of Education, default on those loans. So that statistic may not actually be accurate representation of the student loan crisis in the United States, because individuals are paying back interest. So if there's a 100% repayment rate, that means that the interest for other loans could just make it 100% overall. A good repayment rate would be 110 or 120, because that takes into account interest on those specific loans. So that isn't necessarily an accurate representation of a good student financial situation in regards to the nation. The next issue is that of solvency. They stated that our 3 examples actually side with the negative team in today's debate. I'd like to respond to each of those. The first is that of Missouri University. They stated that there was no effect on borrowing. I have 2 responses. First, the advocates of those studies side with the affirmative team. They stated that even though there was not a substantial effect on borrowing, although it actually did decrease debt to some degree, although it wasn't substantial, it did increase literacy because of the second response. It improved attendance to counselors. When individuals received this information, they were more likely to go to their counselors and actually gain an understanding of how to pay back their debt. They understood that now I have a problem, I want to find someone that can help me solve this problem so that I don't have to deal with this debt in the future. Very much like in order to know that you have a problem take for example myself. If I look in the mirror, I'll see that I need to go to the gym. And just like students, if they look in the mirror or see this loan disclosure, they will see that they need to go to their financial counselor. That's exactly what was illustrated through the example of Missouri University. Montana State University confirmed this in a different way. Basically, they read a part of evidence from a study done in 2015. It was from Montana State University. Now, the evidence presented in the YC was from 2017. It was from the Department of Education, which had a counter study to their study and proved that their study had a flawed methodology. Basically, what the Department of Education found is that they had what was called a diluted sample of students. They had students who didn't actually need to change their borrowing behavior, and when they received this information, they didn't change their behavior, and so there wasn't a decrease in debt. But when the Department of Education consolidated the sample size to individuals who actually had risky levels of debt, it led to a reduction in debt by 1/3. The final issue was that of Indiana University. They stated that there are other programs. I have 3 responses. First, yes, there were other programs, and the loan disclosure actually incentivized students to use those other programs. It helps students actually use the counseling, use the podcast, and use what other programs were put in place. Secondly, when interviewed, students said it was the loan disclosure statement and not these other programs that led to a reduction in debt. There's a direct causation. The third response is that the study indicates that it actually was the debt and not these other programs. The fact of the matter is, students who know more about their debt make better decisions on paying that debt back. Through an affirmative ballot, you make that happen. Thank you all so much for your time.
Of course, I have a couple of questions for you. And just to start off at the top, it talks about the idea of the exemption under 2. Now, is a specific part about the exemption 1,000 pages long?
In the specific Truth in Lending Act, there is no, of course, because it was created in 1969, there is no actual exemption. Our point is that the federal government is exempt.
Okay, so
there's
sorry,
you can go if you have another question.
That would be great. Why does it apply to programs created afterwards, but not the federal government specifically?
For sure, yeah, it does certainly apply to other private organizations after, but because the federal government just simply hasn't applied it to themselves, and no one has brought a court case or anything in relation to it. But in all of the research in relation to the Truth in Lending Act and the federal government, there is no explicit reason why it doesn't apply. In fact, many authors that we can bring up question it themselves. They don't understand.
So you're passing a federal law to enforce the current federal law?
Absolutely not. We're passing a federal law to extend the federal law to apply to something that it should have already applied to.
Okay, interesting. We'll be responding to that and clarifying exactly what it does. We talked about the idea of how really important to promote fairness and transparency. But you agree with the idea that the reason we want this transparency is to help people make better financial decisions, correct?
That is one of the reasons. The other reason is fulfilling the legal obligation of the lender to have this responsibility to disclose basic information to the borrower.
All right, we'll take a closer look at that legal obligation. So how many were borrowing too much in the current system?
How many of who?
How many people are borrowing too much, making bad financial decisions about student loans in the current system?
Well, you have to look at the specific financial situation of each individual student. I mean, $3,000 may be too much for one student, or maybe too little for another.
So do you have any stats on how many can't repay are actually...
Sure. 1 in 10 students in the United States default on loans.
And I agree that default is basically a certain number of years you can't pay. It doesn't mean that over the course of your lifetime you don't pay.
Actually, yeah. Once a student, or once a person who's graduated from college goes into default, there are different things that will be applied to them. Basically, the lender requires all of the money to be paid right then in general. Yes.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. Now, since there's a 1 in 10 default rate, you would agree that 9 in 10 of people do repay their loan.
Yes, and that's one of the worst default rates of any type of loan in the United States.
All right, we'll be taking a look at that default rate. We can also talk about the idea, I believe it was under specifically the Missouri one, how it actually sent people to their counselors and made them go to their counselors.
It did not make them go. It provided the contact information, said you should go to your counselor, and
they responded. Yes. Okay, so just going to counselors, did it actually improve their financial decisions?
As Rajiv Darulia, who's the plan advocate from the team, he quoted, as he states in that study, the impact of going to counseling in general will only be seen in the distant future in relation to if the student defaults in the future.
Okay, so it didn't actually help with their student loans in the current situation?
No, it absolutely did, because it made them understand the loans now so that they could take different courses and maybe switch majors so they can have a better job and a better future.
I'll take a look. Thank you very much, Isaac.
Thank you so much for your questions.
Actually, Isaac, I do have two brothers that are just like yours, and they did one thing in particular to me and my older brother. When I was little, he had plugged in 2 controllers and then gave me the one that he had eventually unplugged to pretend like I was playing the game, just so he could actually play the game alone. So I'm very aware of not having my life and being misinformed, but, I mean, look how that turned out. So, the fact that you don't know something is not inherently harmful for your life as a whole, and it's a misconception of the affirmative team that that is the case. And in my speech, I want to do 2 major things, which is attack the 2 burdens that they agreed to in cross-examination. First of all, whether they can actually solve the problems they presented, if they exist, and second of all, even if they could solve those problems on some level, if they're actually guaranteed to you as the judges a net benefit. I'm going to do this first of all by bringing up 2 solvency points, wondering if they can solve these problems. My first solvency point you can write down as a lack of statements, not the cause of defaults. Lack of statements is not the cause of default. And to understand this, I want to point back to what Isaac said in his last speech, where he said that 1 out of 10 students default. And I think this is true. We're not going to disagree with that. What we are going to say is that 10 out of 10 students use that same system, and yet for some reason, 1 out of 10 defaulted and 9 out of 10 did not. Despite, according to the affirmative team, none of them receiving the necessary information. The impact here is that the letters are not necessary for literacy, which is why 9 out of 10 did not default. It's why the government on all of their federal programs has over 100% repayment rate, because the literacy they're talking about has been proven in the current system not to be necessary, which again is why 9 out of 10 default. The reason the 1 out of 10 defaulted is for completely different reasons and are not exclusive to the statements the affirmative team would give them, and the current system proves that. But the second solvency point I want to go over is that the lack of enforcement is not solved. The lack of enforcement is not solved. And this was addressed by my partner in cross-examination, and I'll give you 3 subpoints to explain it. Subpoint A, I want you to write down as all lenders included in FILA. All lenders included in FILA, which also includes the government. Now, while we don't have an exact text of the bill and what it actually says, the only thing the affirmative team has done for you is read a summary or people's opinions as to what is going on. But let's assume for a moment that this is not happening in the current system. They're not getting the information the affirmative team wants. Under the bill, it specifically in their own evidence talked about, assuming it's correct, that it was on all lenders. There was no exemption from the government. The government just chooses not to do it, which is subpoint B, is that the government is not enforced. Subpoint B is the government is not enforced. As they stated, the bill doesn't actually have an exemption for the government. It's solely because they were created afterwards that it apparently doesn't apply to them, which means they're simply choosing not to do this, because according to their evidence, the text of the bill is that all lenders must do it. But the third subpoint is that no increase in enforcement. There's no increase in enforcement. The fact is that the bill doesn't actually exempt the government. It makes all lenders do it, which is why the affirmative team agreed in cross-examination. Private lenders created after the date of the FILA Act, including the government, they are not exempt from this, and the same way that the government isn't exempt. So even if what they're saying is true, it's not a problem with the law, it's a problem with enforcement. And the affirmative team is going to tell you that if people are committing murder, despite us having a law against murder, we should just make a law that they have to follow the law that you're not allowed to murder. And that's not going to solve anything, because enforcement of the mindset was the original problem, something they simply do not change. But under the assumption that they actually create change, that there actually are some advantages, we still think a negative ballot is warranted for 2 main reasons, or my 2 disadvantages. My first disadvantage you can write down as disincentivizing necessary borrowing. Disincentivizing necessary borrowing. And this assumption from the affirmative team kind of outlined in their 1AC that if you borrow more, it's bad, or that you don't always need to borrow more, that you should borrow less. I have a different subpoint under this, and it's an article by Sophie Quentin and from the Pew Charitable Trust in May of 2016. They say, quote, "Yes, student loan lenders can also have a downside. They can deter students from taking out loans they really need to finance their education." They go on to say later in the article that students may choose to work their way through college to graduate debt-free, but by working rather than studying, they may find it harder to graduate on time or to graduate at all. The one thing we don't want is students who are so stressed about their finances, they can't focus on their academics. The policy discussion is that students need to borrow less, and the reality is that some students may be able to borrow less, but some may need to borrow more, end quote. The fact is, what the affirmative team does is not incentivize them to make financial decisions or help them make financial decisions. They scare the students who actually need this money and would benefit from it from getting it, because that's what the letters will really do, and in and of themselves, that's the only effect we see. The other issue under here, you can write down as borrowing is not always bad. Borrowing is not always bad. And Professor Rajiv Darolia, the one they have quoted from the Professor of Public Policy in June 2016, says, quote, "Research does not establish a strong causal link between higher levels of borrowing and default, and not all students will benefit from borrowing less," end quote. The important part here is that many students need to borrow more, and the affirmative team doesn't only incentivize the ones who are making bad decisions to do better or borrow less, they're also scaring the ones who actually need the money to borrow less, causing them to get a job, making it harder for them to focus on academics, making it harder for them to graduate on time, and hurting their education. But the second disadvantage I want to give to you, you can write down as masking the real problems. Masking the real problems. Even under the world where the affirmative team made a small impact, the fact is the real problems that lie underneath the harm they presented are not solved by them and will still exist after an affirmative ballot. I have 3 different subpoints under this. Subpoint A, you can write down as limited capacity. Limited capacity. And this piece of evidence, again, by Rajiv Darolia states, quote, students received an electronic letter, but there were no additional systemic supports that accompanied the letter since the university in this setting could not incur substantial technology or administrative costs. These resource constraints are common to many institutions that have limited capacity, end quote. One of the reasons the current system may not be using these letters according to the affirmative team is because they don't have the capacity or the resources to do so, and they don't allocate that in the affirmative team's plan. If you go to the funding, they just says, they'll figure it out and find the funding sources somehow. They aren't doing that right now because they physically can't in some instances. That's not changed with an affirmative ballot. My second sub-point you can write down as other alternatives needed. Other alternatives needed. And I'll point you to the piece of evidence my partner read in her last speech, and she'll explain her responses to their arguments in the Tracy and the next speech. But I want to note that the evidence specifically noted that there were other alternatives needed when discussing these projects within those universities. It wasn't just the letters or counseling, it was programs that actually help them make better financial decisions, because that is the problem. Simply knowing you have a problem doesn't fix the problem, and the affirmative team doesn't address that. They're only sending the letters to people after they have taken out these loans and after they have already borrowed, and it doesn't help their finances. It doesn't prevent them from defaulting. The only thing it does is scare real students from taking out loans that are necessary and hurting their graduation rates and hurting their academic experience. My third subpoint you can write down as isolated intervention. Isolated intervention. Now, the affirmative team, again, only sends a letter and they don't guarantee financial counseling, and they don't provide specific guidance for students. Essentially, debt letters among themselves only scare these students into less borrowing by showing them larger sums of money. But the impact of all of this deals with a missed opportunity and, again, a masking of the problem. We've given you the root problems and what actually caused these students to be financially illiterate and some solutions to those. But those solutions are not the ones of the affirmative team. When you vote for the affirmative team, you guarantee that you need to, but second of all, the only thing you get is a net loss, and it's for that reason I would ask for a negative ballot. Thank you.
Congratulations on making it to finals. Thank you. Would you agree that equal application to law should be maintained?
I think when it's important to, but we have to make sure that you can actually enforce the application of the law and not just say we should do it.
Absolutely. Would you agree the United States federal government, in regards to student loans, is a consumer lender?
I think so.
Now, would you agree that providing basic information about a student's loans to that student it should happen?
Not necessarily. I think we should do what is important and beneficial to them. The affirmative team has the burden to prove a need for reform and that they solve that on a net beneficial scale. The fact that we just want more information inherently doesn't provide us a real benefit.
So it's the stance of the negative team that we should not provide a student their basic loan terms, the terms of the loans?
No, they should have the terms of the loan, specifically with the financial payments, though we have to argue whether that's necessary.
The terms of their loans, they should.
I agree with you. They should have the terms.
They should have the terms of the loans.
Yes.
All right. In regards to literacy, you stated that literacy does not equal, or like the loan disclosure statement will not equal a decrease in defaults nationwide.
Right. It doesn't make them more financially capable.
Now, did the affirmative team ever state that literacy was the only reason students default?
No, that wasn't our plan.
So you would agree that it is there are other factors that contribute to
I
this?
think there are a lot of factors that you simply don't address with your plan.
Now, under the issue of, you stated that this would disincentivize necessary borrowing, and your impact of this was basically stress and dropouts, correct?
That's what the evidence specifically discussed, talking about how you're hurting their academic experience oftentimes because they borrow less, and then start trying to get a job and finding other ways to cover that, and that hurts their academic.
Would you agree at Indiana University, when this loan disclosure was implemented, not a single individual who received the loan disclosure dropped out of college?
I haven't seen the evidence for that, but you sound very sure, so at this point I'll agree, but I think it's important to look at that.
In regards to a credit card, say that the credit card company thought that I would be stressed if I received the credit card bill. Should they be exempt of their responsibility to send you the credit card bill?
Okay, I first want to note that credit card bills and whether you receive those statements are a completely different debate topic. On that, the lender's responsibility.
How are they, if they're open-ended credit, how are they different? They're under the Truth in Lending Act.
Right, I'm specifically talking about how the credit card information, that's not what your plan is doing. We're talking about for the students and their specific debt, which is different when they're in college versus having a job and not living in the real world. On the issue of whether they should receive that based on stress, it's not the lender's job to determine if they will be stressed from that, but it is the affirmative team's job to guarantee that the plan creates a net benefit, and if you inadvertently cause stress and cause dropouts, that is a disadvantage.
And you agree so far that not a single dropout has ever been caused because of our water solution.
I'm not sure if we've seen that evidence, so I won't necessarily agree that's the case.
All right, it's time to be done. Thank you so much for your answers.
The affirmative team in this debate is basically working under the assumption that if we inform these students, obviously they're going to make better financial decisions, which is going to improve their lives, and everyone will be better off. Unfortunately, though, that assumption has a missing link. And that's the link from the actual financial literacy contributing to better payment of their loans or actually better financial decisions in the end. And we haven't really seen a single piece of evidence saying that a single student made a better payment or better financial decision in regards to student loans as a result of these letters. And that is missing. We have to say, oh, they went to counseling now. Oh, they at least had this information now. So what? So what if they have this information? What does the information actually do? And unless the students act on the information, we see nothing actually happening. I'm going to take a look at this. What I want to do is provide you with 3 main contentions that really summarize the main points of the negative team in my speech. So let's start off with my first one, that there is no change in the application of the law. There is no change in the application of the law. Now, one of the things that they brought in the cross-examination is, well, we're not just improving financial literacy, we're ensuring that there's equal application of the law. However, my partner really showed you how this wasn't going to be the case. In the current system, they themselves agree there is no exemption for the federal government in TILA. Now, they also stated that any lender which became a lender after TILA was instituted would be under TILA. So that would make sense that the federal government would fall under TILA. The only reason that they wouldn't is because the federal government themselves chose to not be under it and chose to not follow it, not because TILA says, oh, no federal policies actually fall under it. There is nothing in there stating that. So the only reason is because the federal government chose not to enforce it on themselves. And therefore, passing a law saying, oh, enforce this, isn't going to help enforce a law that they chose not to follow, unless they actually change the enforcement and give the federal government an incentive to follow it. And they are not doing either. So whether or not you believe in the idea of equal application under the law, it's going to be exactly the same. The application is the problem. The law currently is equal, but they're not changing the application. So let's go into my second contention, the idea that current borrowing is responsible. Current borrowing is responsible. The next idea that the affirmative really presented you is the idea that in the current system, people are making bad financial decisions. However, I would ask you, what statistics did they give you on bad financial decisions? The only stat we have in this round is that 1 in 10 people go into default. Now, I want to explain to you what default means. Default usually means in student loans, 3 years, if you don't pay anything back on your student loans or don't make the payments, then you go into default. That doesn't mean you don't pay on a whole. And that is why I brought up the statistic on our payment rates and not the statistic on default rates. Because the question is not how many people default, but how many repay in the end. Because as my partner brought up, ignorance can affect you for a little while, but as long as you figure out in the end, then it doesn't actually have a huge impact on your entire life. And we brought up statistics from the Department of Education in 2017 saying that in every single one of their student loan programs, there's over a 100% repayment rate. Meaning that the federal government is making a profit, there is no problem. Even if you agree, financial literacy is great, that's fine. In the current system, we are seeing there is no harm to the United States, there is no harm to you, there is no harm to me, there is no harm to the federal government, there is no harm to the students because they are able to repay in the current system. And even if you say, well, there may be a few exceptions, so what? We ask the question once again, have they proven a predominance of failure? Have they proven to you that students currently cannot make good financial decisions and currently, as a result, are actually having harmful things happen to them in their lives, causing them not to repay their loans? And they have not once proven that to you. So let's go into my third and final contention, that there is no improvement in repayment. No improvement in repayment. Now, I talked about a little bit under the studies, and they critiqued a few of them, and then under one of them, under Montana one, they talked about one specific thing was the idea of how, well, it may actually decreasing borrowing, but one thing it did do was push them to counselors. Now I found that interesting because counselors are great, yes, but unless that counseling actually led them to make better choices in the future, that doesn't really have an impact. I mean, what has the affirmative not proven? And they proved that they went to counseling, but what have they not proven? The link, that it actually helped them make better decisions in the future. In fact, Dr. Beth Akers from the Brookings Institute did a study, and I can pass from the methodology on this one, and it said, quote, there was no evidence to suggest that any subgroups of students changed their borrowing behavior as a result of their letter, end quote, when they sent out letters. Be happy to pass from the methodology so they can look at it, but the idea is once again the same. We do not have proof from the affirmative team, and they have the burden of proving this to be around. That is why we urge the negative ballot. Thank you.
Is everyone else set? Timer's ready? As well as the negative team. The negative speaker asked for a single example of an individual who changed their borrowing behavior as a result of the debt letter. Take, for example, Natalie Cahill. Natalie was a student at Indiana University, and she describes her experience with this loan disclosure, stating, quote, when you take out loans for the year, you just see the small number, then the grand total. Seeing the letter definitely put things into perspective. Cahill, who said she had taken out about a $22,000 loan, plans to borrow less for this year and will use earnings from a summer hospital job to overcome costs. When we look at the impact of the debt letter, it improves students' responsibility, showing them the direct amount that they actually owe, and therefore showing them how they can pay it back. The first big argument that the negative team made was that there are good repayment statistics, essentially that borrowing in the current system is responsible. I have three responses to this argument. First, this is not satisfactory. It does not take away the responsibility of the lender in providing this information. This would basically be like saying, if people are already paying their car loan, then there's no need to provide them with information about their car loan. This is simply illogical. Providing this information is a responsibility, whether or not people are doing a good job of paying back their loans. The second response is that the information is not proactive. In the current system, information is not sent directly to students. My third response is that it helps students make better decisions for the future. Not only their current decisions, but also decisions that they can make in the future. Rather than, they said that there's not a bad default rate right now, people are able to pay it off. But that means sometimes people are spending years trying to pay off this debt. Providing this information straightforward allows students to prepare for the future. The second big argument made by the negative team was in a lack of enforcement. I have three responses. First, the Truth in Lending Act doesn't say that the federal government is quote-unquote exempt from the law. However, it does not include the federal government in the legislation. Advisors Network says the federal student loans are not subject to Truth in Lending Act. And this is the exact point of the affirmative team. The federal government is exempt. They are not exemption of the law, they're just not required by the law. And my second response is that the affirmative team's plan extends this policy to the government. The affirmative team's plan extends this legislation to the government. The third response is that the government shouldn't decide which laws they want to follow. If the federal government is acting as a lender, they should adhere to the laws that govern consumer lenders. Simply the Truth in Lending legislation. If they're going to be a lender, they must adhere to these laws. The third big main point by the negative team was the disadvantage of disincentivized borrowing. I have three responses. First of all, the debt letter doesn't prevent students from taking out loans. The purpose of the debt letter is not to micromanage students' borrowing behavior, but simply inform them of how much they borrowed. Second response, scaring students does not excuse the responsibility of the lender. Take, for example, a credit card bill. What if a credit card company said, you know what, John Tofte probably has a lot on his plate right now, I'm not going to send him a credit card bill this month. Would that be adequate? Absolutely not. The lender still has the responsibility to provide this information, whether or not it's going to quote-unquote scare the individuals of how much they've actually borrowed. My third response is this is a slippery slope fallacy. It's a slippery slope fallacy. I have 2 points under this. First, there is no evidence that the letter decreased grades or increased dropouts. This is purely speculative. But my second response under this point is that when we look at the institutions where it was tested, enrollment remained flat. The fourth big point in today's debate round was the second disadvantage of masking the real problem. I have 2 responses. First of all, this is not a disadvantage, it is simply a solvency argument, saying that we are misidentifying the problem. But my second response is colleges can have other initiatives. If they want to have counseling, as is required in the current system, or other initiatives, they're free to do so. As seen through the loan disclosure, the debt letter increases the effectiveness of these other initiatives. The fifth big argument in today's debate round was the third disadvantage of isolated intervention. A direct quote from the negative speaker said that it doesn't guarantee counsel. Well, that seems in direct violation of what Ellen, her partner, said in her first speech or cross-examination when she said that counseling is required under the Higher Education Act of 1965. Counseling is already required in the current system. Therefore, the third disadvantage is moot. The final big argument that I want to touch on today's debate round is that of solvency. Will the affirmative team's plan actually solve the problem? They said that the affirmative team will not decrease debt, and they critiqued our studies. I have two responses. First, simply, is that our goal is not to decrease debt. I even stated this in the 1AC. Isaac and I have never claimed to solve debt. The goal is responsibility of the lender and personal responsibility. Providing more information allows for better decisions. But secondly, the goal of a credit card bill is not to micromanage behavior, but rather inform individuals. The second response is when we look at the studies, it actually did decrease. The counter study by Montana State University went uncontested by the negative team during both of their speeches. When we look at the studies of Indiana University, it decreased by $100 million, and Montana State by 1/3. Because we need to hold the government to the same law of accountability and provide more information to students, I ask you to pass the Leads Act and side with the affirmative team.
In the first cross-examination of this debate round, the affirmative team agreed to three things. They told you in order to have an affirmative ballot, they have to prove, first of all, that there is a need for reform, second of all, they begin to solve for that reform, and third of all, they have to guarantee to you as the judges a net benefit. These are the standards I'm applying in today's debate round. It's the standards I'm going to hold the affirmative team to. What I want to show you in my speech through my three voting issues is, first of all, that I haven't met any of these standards, let alone all of them. And I'll explain that with the 3 points. My first point you can write down as lack of literacy doesn't cause financial harm. Lack of literacy doesn't cause financial harm. And I have 2 subpoints under this issue addressing whether there's a current harm in the system. Subpoint A, you can write down as goal of transparency is better financing. The goal of transparency is better financing. We argued this throughout the entire debate room when we said that transparency in and of itself is not beneficial. And then second of all, my partner read their own evidence in the justification of the 1AC where it noted that the reason we have the literacy or the transparency, as they put it, is so they can make better financial decisions. Giving them knowledge just for the heck of it does nothing for these students. The only reason it's beneficial is if they can make better decisions from that. My second subpoint is no systemic failure. No systemic failure. The affirmative team would have to show that in the current system, because there's a lack of their plan, there is failure in the financial literacy of these students and a failure in the financial capabilities of these students. They haven't done this. We gave you the evidence talking about how there was over a 100% repayment rate for every single federal program that the government currently has because they are repaying. And on the issue of defaults, my partner addressed that, how it's generally a 3-year period. They can pay back at any time, even after going into default. The reason it's over 100% is because they are paying back, and yet according to the affirmative team, they don't have these letters and we don't have their plan. And that's because there's not a systemic failure. They can read you 1 or 2 or 3 examples that doesn't prove their plan. The second main issue I want to bring up, you can write down as letters don't guarantee literacy. Letters don't guarantee literacy. And under this point, I'll again have 3 subpoints discussing this. And the first one deals with the idea of the government including of the law. Now, subpoint A, you can write down as not solving for enforcement. Again, not solving for enforcement. Their only response to the enforcement argument was to say it doesn't include the government. And I would say that's true. It also doesn't say private lenders, or it doesn't include every lender included afterwards. It says every single lender, because every single lender is required. That's why private institutions are required to do this, because the government enforces that. It may suck, but the government is not enforcing itself in this instance under the affirmative team's assumptions, but they do not solve for that. They don't increase enforcement. And so at the point in which their plan is not passed in the current system, because the act is flawed, it's because of enforcement which they do not solve for. Subpoint C, you can write to me. Subpoint B is precedence doesn't guarantee benefits. Subpoint B is precedence doesn't guarantee benefits. Now, we gave you 3 pieces of evidence responding to all of their examples in the 1AC, and their only piece of evidence to respond was to say that the Montana study was reworked and actually showed a benefit. I would say let's accept that for the sake of argument, and now you're left with 2 versus 1. 2 on the negative side which said there was no effect, and 1 on the affirmative side which says that there was an effect. At best, the affirmative team is rolling the dice with their plan, and that's not a guarantee of an advantage, let alone a guarantee of a net benefit. The third subpoint you can write is no proof of better future. No proof of a better future. We already discussed the idea of lending practices, and they said, what about the lenders and ensuring their responsibility? Their responsibility, because it's the federal government, we have this program not to make money because that's not a guarantee. We have it to help the students who need that because they don't want to go to the private sector. We have the federal program. In this case, the federal lender is meant to help the students and their finances. That is the end goal. If it were a private lender, we could be talking about this differently, but the federal lender, their end goal, and the same goal we have transparency for, according to, again, their evidence, is for financial gain, to make sure they have better financial capabilities, but that doesn't happen with an affirmative ballot. The third main subpoint I have for you is that of a net loss. A net loss. And again, the three subpoints begin with A, which is that of an unquantified harm. An unquantified harm. And I simply want you to draw an arrow from my first voting issue because it's simply saying that at best the affirmative team doesn't know how big the problem is and the current system. Subpoint B is the same thing but for advantages. So subpoint B is an unquantified advantage. Again, draw an arrow from subpoint 2, the second voting issue. At best the affirmative team can say B might have a benefit, we just have no clue how big. My third and final subpoint is that the disadvantages stand. The disadvantages stand. They talked about in response to the disincentivizing necessary borrowing, they say they don't micromanage, that's true, but they do psychological damage. On the issue of the masking the problems, they said that's a solvency point, that's not a problem. It is a problem because nothing gets done. All of the problems they present to you could exist in the current system and could fall under the affirmative team's plan, but because they don't have the right solution, those problems will still exist and policymakers will do nothing about it. Colleges will do nothing about it because the affirmative team told them the problem is fixed, when the reality is it's not. Thank you.
Students who know more about their debt make better decisions on paying that debt back. That statement was agreed upon by every member of today's debate round in cross-examination. And yet the negative team so far in today's debate round has contended that a lack of literacy does not actually result in harm. But my simple response is that if students are not informed about their debt, they will make poor decisions. If students do not have the understanding of their loans, they will make poor decisions. That principle has been agreed upon, and yet they've been contradicting themselves throughout the entirety of today's debate round. If you vote for the negative team, what you are forced to believe is that ignorance is bliss, is that ignorance of your financial situation is okay, is that systematic ignorance of millions of students across the United States of America is acceptable. John and I believe that is not acceptable. We believe that there is a need for change. We believe our course of action provides that change. I'd like to consolidate, for lack of a better term, all the arguments in today's debate round into three main voting issues. The first is transparency. Transparency in the borrowing process. And I have three subpoints about this. First, current loan information is not consolidated. Current loan information is not consolidated. The negative team has remained, for the most part, silent on this issue in today's debate round. In the current system, in order to find your interest rates, you have to go to your loan servicer. In order to find your total loan balance, you have to go to the NCFCA. In order to find your payment plan, you have to go to your loan servicer. In order to find contact information, you have to go to your school. And that is just for federal loans. In order to find private loan information, you have to go to the private avenues for all of this information. It's not consolidated. That is a harm in and of itself. Students basically have to play hide and seek to find this information. Student loans is not a game of hide and seek, and it shouldn't be for college students across the United States. The second subpoint is it's not proactive. It's not proactive. It is ineffective because it's not directly given to these students, and therefore a lot of students don't take the time to actually search this information and understand their financial situation. The third subpoint is that they stated that transparency does not equal better decisions. I have two responses to this. First, we never claimed that that was not the only reason that we are claiming transparency. We believe that transparency fulfills the government's responsibility to provide this, under the Truth in Lending Act, to provide this information to students, just providing this and disclosing it. But my second response is the example of a car loan or a credit card bill or any other type of loan. It's not necessarily meant to change your borrower's behavior. It's meant for transparency so that an individual has all of the relevant information. If they choose not to change their behavior because they don't think they need to, that's their decision. The government's responsibility is not to change borrowers' decisions, it's just to fulfill their responsibility to provide this information. The second voting issue is literacy. My first argument under this is that of the Brookings study. At the beginning of the 1AC, John stated that 50% of students do not accurately estimate how much debt they have within $10,000. That is a harm in and of itself. It's been unrefuted by the negative team. They stated that illiteracy in and of itself isn't a harm. They stated the only way to prove a harm is if students actually default. And there isn't a large default rate, therefore there actually isn't a harm. And I would disagree with this entirely. If an individual goes their entire life, 40 years, paying back a loan, and then they eventually pay back that loan and never default, is that not a harm to that borrower? It certainly is a harm. That they are saddled with that debt obligation their entire life because of that poor financial decision they made in college. We don't believe that students should have to be saddled with that responsibility, and they can make the decisions in college to change that, so that they don't have that future, and so they don't have to default in the future, or not default, but just simply have an extended period of paying back that debt. The second issue is out of the studies. They stated that we won the Montana State study, therefore we just have the others two. So it's one down, two to go. The first one is Indiana University. They failed to address my evidence and stated that when the students were interviewed, they said it was the loan disclosure that led to the change in borrowing. They failed to address that. The second study was at Missouri. They failed to address that when this information was provided, counseling was increased. Individuals were actually incentivized to learn more about not only their financial situation, but how to deal with it in an effective manner. The next issue under literacy is they stated we're masking real solutions. We're masking other solutions. My first point is the only team in today's background that actually provides a solution is the affirmative team. My second sub-point is that the first step in solving any problem is realizing that there is one. And the first step in solving any problem with loans is first providing information to students so that they see they have that problem. Then they can use the other programs. The final voting issue is equal application of the law. And they stated this will not be enforced. Once we make it explicit in the law, the federal government must be held to the same standard as every other lender, then individuals can sue the government if they feel that obligation in court. It will be applied legally, and under a further ballot, we make that happen. On behalf of both teams in today's background, thank you all so much for your time.